opinions expressed by our callers and guests do not necessarily reflect those of the management and staff of AM 1490 WHPV. And now, here's today's Viewpoint.
And good morning and welcome into the Friday Morning Viewpoint. For this Friday morning, March the 1st, 2024. I'm your host, Randy Williams. Our guest this morning is attorney Yusuf Salaam. And good morning, attorney, again.
Fine. Good morning to you. And you talking about, my friend, these various hats that I'm wearing, and you mentioned the executive director of the Jonathan Daniels CDC, as if that is a Stetson hat or something. But it's barely a skull cap in the sense that you and I know I'm not getting paid not one dime for that title, but everything is not rooted in money. I think about the sacrifice that Jonathan Daniels made on August 20th, 1965, when he jumped in front of a shotgun blast that was intended for my oldest sister, Rubenell Sales. And you asked me yesterday what I was going to talk about. You know, we were supposed to have a special guest, but I thought about Ruby. Sometimes you have to be a lonely voice in the wilderness. And we're going to talk about some things tonight, this morning, but I'm not going to talk as one trying to be popular and accepted by everyone. I remember when Ruby really was about 14, 15 years old. And she was in this speaking contest. And there was a line in that speech that still reverberates to me to this day. But I think the speech itself suggested her life inclination, her destiny. And I used to wake up and she'd be in the living room just practicing. Although I may be a little voice crying out in the wilderness, I shall be heard. And with all the big elite stars in town this morning and tomorrow and the next day, everybody running down the party line, not willing to critique the current state of African American affairs, suggesting that we should be in a state of perpetual jubilation, constantly celebrating. Well, I'm going to be that lonely voice in the wilderness this morning to suggest that we might have more to be sad about and to grieve about than we have to be jubilant about this weekend. Of course, now the events, March 7th, 1965, were performed by different people. And just the thought of the caliber of people back then, African American and Caucasian, let's not forget that.
And the dignity that they all had. They had dignity.
Yeah, James Reeb came to Selma with dignity.
Right.
And he shed his blood. So we're not just talking about African American.
Put a pin in that, because, you know, we have all age groups and races that listen to this program ordinarily, and who knows who's in town. But for people, they need to know that Jonathan Daniels was white, number one.
Yeah, he was white.
You know, and he answered Dr. King's call after Bloody Sunday. And he stayed after, he decided to stay. He was a graduate of VMI and an Episcopalian seminarian. And
yeah, that's right.
He's the only saint, the American saint in the Episcopal Church worldwide.
There you go. And on a particular day when he made his decision to come, he was listening to the Magnificat, and he heard Dr. King's call, and he decided to immediately make arrangements to come to Selma. For those in the audience who are not familiar with the Magnificat, you might want to go check it out. Those were the values that was moving and motivating Jonathan Daniels to make that journey as a hero to Selma, and in time give up his life to save another. And so now that's the kind of people we have. Those are the kind of Americans we have. But we can see a falling off. But this morning I'm going to focus on the great falling off of our people.
So on that point,
Great falling off.
on that point, terrible story coming out of Birmingham, and I think this probably epitomizes when we were at our lowest point, and that is that 7 people, 3 men and three or 4 men and 3 women, kidnapped and tortured a 20-year-old black female, black men and women. They pistol whipped her, sexually assaulted her, sodomized her, and then shot her. And her body was found in a dump, an illegal dump under a mattress. She had texted her mother that she had been kidnapped and asked, and her sister, and told them to send the police. They said, don't call, send the police. And that was how they were, that was part of how they were able to find her. Plus they had assistance from people in the community, and they finally found her body that morning around 2 o'clock in the morning. And they have all been arrested. The suspects have been arrested. But how horrific, how barbaric and animalistic, you know, can you be? These are young people now, 18 to 23 years old.
My brother, you have a very excellent vocabulary, but you couldn't think of terms as you just tried to describe such a dastardly, heinous crime. And it demonstrates, and I'm going to say it, I told you I'm going to be the collective depravity of the African American male. And ironically, this kind of revelation is coming out at a time where 2 of our great men from back then, the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the late Malcolm Shabar, they are being featured on an excellent mini, I wouldn't call it a documentary. I guess they would see a movie.
It's a combination of both. But it's a series. I'm familiar with the series, right?
Yeah. And when you look back, those men didn't torture or murder anybody. Dr. King was tortured when a bullet almost tore his head up, standing up for the rights of the human being. Malcolm X took a proliferation of gunshot pellets in his heart, standing up for rights of the human being. They didn't brutally engage in barbaric, atrocious murder and mayhem. So just within this short period of time, what I mean, 50 or so years.
That's nothing, right.
That's nothing in human history.
Right.
We have declined from that kind of human, and I know the egotistical brothers, the stars in town, they not gonna wanna hear this. They gonna wanna act like we still all this and that, but we're not, okay? And it's sad to see how they use a little Hollywood image, Superfly, and all that embryonic beginning of selling us the thug life. Then they took that imagery and concretized it in sound called music. And then they brought out a group with an attitude, systematically and collectively enticing us to be attracted to a thug life, a life that promotes hatred of women, blatant misogyny, a life devoid of moral and spiritual principles, a life bragging on smoking and killing your brother. You see?
And sister.
And our sister.
Yeah, and now the sisters are involved.
Yeah, and the sisters killing up each other.
Right.
What a terrible decline. One of the most outstanding examples historically in rampant human decadence in the history of mankind. If you study history carefully, you're not going to find any people that are experiencing the kind of group decadence that we are in such a short. You only take 200-300 years for people to have this kind of decline, this kind of devolution that we have experienced collectively as African Americans since the noble events of the 60s.
59 years.
Yeah, yeah. And so now I think we have to consciously acknowledge this, come to grips with it, stop repressing it, stop denying it, stop rationalizing it, and try to go back to the drawing board and deal with it.
So now, last Saturday at Selma High School, there was a panel discussion that was geared towards single mothers and how to raise their sons. Excellent panel discussion, and then there were some presenters and panelists. But at the end of the day, and to my surprise, I really didn't realize that the numbers say that 80% of students in Selma City schools come from single-parent homes. I don't know what percentage of that is female, but I'm sure the lion's share of it is. And then it's been said that Selma, per capita, has more single-family homes per capita than anywhere else in the nation. And one other thing, because I had a call yesterday, all the time when I'm out, people are always saying to me, what are we going to do about Selma's image? And when are we going to start cleaning Selma up? We've had years, we've had enough time to get the cosmetics right. And people are really frustrated about the way the city looks. They've said, well, why don't you get some cleaning crews, commercial cleaning crews, and clean up and let Public Works help maintain it, because it may be too much with the current crew that Public Works has. And so I say all of that to say, well, you know, we've had enough time politically to be able to address these issues and come up with some solutions and figure a way out and turn this thing around culturally. Birmingham is just, well, we know about the violence in Chicago. There's not many days that go by in Montgomery when somebody's not shot or killed. Montgomery doesn't have a poverty problem. They're the seat of the state government. They've got 3 or 4 universities. They've got the Air Force Base, you know, all kinds of money. So poverty is not the issue. So what do we do? What do you think? What do you think we need to do?
Well, like I indicated, I'm going to be this morning that lonely voice crying out in the wilderness. And if you don't cut me off before this 60 minutes is up, I shall be heard.
Cut them off, cut them off.
I shall be heard. Look, the probate judge of this county, choir director, steeped in Shallow Baptist Church, the chief executive of this city, I'm just being real,
right,
is a pastor. The solution to a lot of this is proper biblical instruction, execution, and implementation. What do I mean? The kingdom of God, I'm going to say it slowly, is within. You have all these folk, and I hesitate to say this as a so-called Muslim. Oh, everybody be getting mad at me because I'm a so-called Muslim. But I think I have more fidelity and loyalty to the tenets and Bible than most of the citizens in Selma, Alabama. You can take that to the bank. Now, it says the kingdom of God within is within. Your analysis is incorrect. Attempting to clean up the external state of Selma. That's what it is. The state of Selma, externally, alone, without understanding the wisdom in that biblical injunction. See, the inside of the human being is called a state of mind. The city of Selma is a state governmental unit. The physical structures, the physical buildings, if you clean them up, if you invest monies in that, but there is no corresponding effort to restructure the internal state of our people now. Internally restructure the state of our young women and our young men that's precipitating these stats that you talked about in terms of Selma leading the nation in terms of single-family home. You can, and this is where we're going to be deceived again in Selma. We got $2 million grant, a $750,000 grant, another $750,000 grant. The Biden administration is feeding allegedly monies into this area, which is good, which is necessary, but it's not sufficient. And you can invest all that material resource into this city, and you can look up 5-10 years, it'll be worse off then than it is now, unless there's some systematic effort by all of these churches on the East Corner in the African American community in Selma to begin to come up with a strategy to address the inner kingdom of African Americans, to make our behavior accord with moral excellence, spiritual excellence, and human decency. Under no standards does that example that you cite reflect any sense of morality, spirituality, and decency. The way they destroyed that human life of that young lady up in Birmingham. Birmingham, like Selma and Montgomery, one of the 3 cities in this state that if you put points at each one form a almost perfect equilateral triangle in the heart of Dixie. Okay, these 3 cities, if you look at the stats, you see all these negative pathological indicators of the state of our people. Okay, and Dr. King, John Lewis, and many of those African Americans, they were on that bridge because they were trying to bring about a beloved community that was advocated by the key figure in the Bible, Jesus the Christ of Nazareth. And they didn't have the resources. They didn't have any elected officials. Most of those African Americans didn't have the income level that we have now. They didn't even have a toothpick, 600 of them out on that bridge, coming up against horses and billy clubs. Do you understand? Tear gas.
We were doing good. Didn't they have a car?
That's right.
A car in the community.
Men may have walked from Oroville to Brown Chapel just to make the march.
I'm told they walked from Camden.
Yeah.
They walked from Camden to Dallas to Selma.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. But with that lack of resources, they were able to triumph and prevail. Why? Because the inner kingdom, brother, was more developed. The inner kingdom was more solid. And the results on the outside then reflected what was on the inside. The change must come from the inside out. But we don't want to hear that. All the stars, all the big shots just want us to celebrate them and brag about what they have done and what they're doing now. And and genuflex before them as they come into town. Oh, this, that big celebrity, this is that big celebrity. Celebrate their praises and understand that our biggest problem is that we have stopped celebrating the praises of our Lord. And in the Christian context, seriously doing it for Jesus and caught up into celebrating the praises of these celebrities that will be genuflexing over when they come into town this weekend.
Well, I'm told
I told you I'm not going to be very popular.
Well, no, sir. This program is called Viewpoint, and we go across the spectrum, and so you're welcome to. This is, you know, I'm really bothered by the state of the First Amendment in this country and our lack of tolerance for various points of view. I can't learn without more than one point of view sometimes. I may feel one way about a subject, and we've often had conversations. When I get through, I may change my mind about. I may reconsider my position.
That's right.
You know, so I think it's healthy to have a good, healthy debate. I know you're a Muslim, and you've got Ramadan. Tell us what Ramadan is and what you do, and when is it coming this month?
Ramadan is a religious ritual designed to give us as human beings the ability to control runaway animalistic impulses. Those brothers who engage in that crime, they may have been better human beings if they had a ritualistic practice of fasting so that they could control their animal impulses to be aggressive, to be violent. So Ramadan is a religious discipline designed to give us the ability to control what Paul called our carnal makeup. And that's very, very, very important if we're going to live the life of civilized human beings. And it'll be coming up on March 11th. And there are over 2 billion Muslims on the planet. And most of us will be practicing fasting during the month of Ramadan.
Now, do you fast 24 hours or from sun up to sundown, or how does that work?
We fast based upon the pattern that was established by the figure that the Bible called the Comforter. When Jesus predicted an entity coming afterwards, some interpret that to mean
The return of Christ.
no, the Holy Spirit. That the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit. But it was referring to the coming of a prophet after Jesus that was known about in Judaism as well as the Christian folks of that era after Christ. And he established a model as to how to fast. Now Jesus fasts. If you go read the verses, I think in Matthew, about the faith that moved mountains, he indicated that that kind of faith will not work unless one fasts and prays. So now all the religious disciplines from Adam up until now have practiced fasting. The question is, what's the fasting technique? How long? What do you refrain from? But in the example set by the Comforter, Prophet Muhammad, we fast from sun up to sundown, and it's a total air fast, meaning that there's no consumption of any liquid,
Not even liquid.
any food.
Not even water.
That's right, not even water.
Wow.
From sun up to sundown. Now, but that fasting period is based upon the lunar calendar. So sometimes the month of Ramadan is in the summer. And so you got to fast 15, 16 hours.
Wow.
But we're moving now toward the winter months, and Ramadan may not be but maybe 9 or 10 hours, if that long.
But you guys are it looks like it's gonna overlap with Easter this year as well. So that should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it should be because they both emphasize resurrection. Now, if you engage in a year of sinning the way I have, and you become a little dead into your spiritual makeup. So you want that in the average Muslim at this point, we can't wait to get to Ramadan because we know the wages of sin is death, and we somewhat died in the last 11 months since Ramadan, and we need to put our carnal bodies in the shop, our vehicle, and get a tune-up for the next 11 months, and then after maybe 3 or 4, we back in that same bag.
You remind me of Mardi Gras. You know, they say on Fat Tuesday, I guess when Fat Tuesday comes, you do every possible sin that you can think of, and then you have Ash Wednesday, and you fast for the next 40 days before Easter.
That's right.
You know, I call that premeditated sin.
No.
Before Ash Wednesday.
It's an acknowledgement that we all going to sin and fall short of the glory. So we need a discipline where we can delimit that. We're not going to eliminate it. And so so we start looking forward to the month of Ramadan. But the irony is that while I'm depriving my physical body of food, I'm to read the holy book. 1 juice a day. The Quran is divided up into 1/30th. And if you read 1/30th a day, then you would have read the whole Quran by the end of Ramadan. So while you're depriving your body during the day, you're feeding your soul.
Man does not live by bread alone.
You're feeding your soul. So now you got to remember, I've been fasting for over 45 years. So that means that I have read the Holy Quran over 45 times. How many times have you read that Bible from cover to cover?
Only once. Only, and that was a lifetime goal. I said before I die, I wanted to read it once at least. So I tell you, let's go to the phone line and see what we got. Viewpoint, you're on the air.
I got gas over there on McFarland Boulevard. It was $2.91.
$2.91. Where was this?
On McFarland Boulevard in Tuscaloosa.
Wow, that's pretty good. That's much better than where we are right now here.
That's right. I think the original went up. We know what that is. Any holiday or anything going on in Selma?
Well, we've got you got the Jubilee, and you've got Bloody Sunday commemoration coming up on Sunday, but I don't know. Any excuse will do to raise the price of gas, huh?
Yeah, and it's $2.92 at the Circle K across from Murphy's on McFarland, and you got a card, the rewards card is $2.82.
Well, the question is it worth it making a trip? By the time you make a trip, unless you had to go to Tuscaloosa, but
Tuscaloosa anyway?
Right, so I'm sure you filled up, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anything else you'd like to say? We got to get ready to take a break. You want to make a closing remark?
Yeah, I'll come back later.
Thank you so much. We're going to take this break, and we'll be back with more. Our guest this morning, Attorney Yusuf Salaam, and he's the late Attorney J.L. Chestnut used to say the hard, cold truth. So you're giving us the hard, cold truth this morning, huh?
That's what's needed. Although I'm a little voice crying out in the wilderness, we're going to be heard this morning, Mr. Williams.
All right, we'll be back with more right after this.
I'm surprised you haven't got a call from in the read out from there.
Well, no, I mean, what are they going to do? Say you're wrong? They're gonna tell you you're wrong, and we're not acting like animals in some of these places. They can't say that, huh?
How could they tell that lie?
Because that's what it would be.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We have lost our moral compass.
Complete dog.
You know, it's way off. Yeah.
And the so-called successful ones, they lost theirs by sitting around watching the masses lose theirs, and they didn't try to lift a finger to help. So you're morally guilty too, brother.
Well, W. DeVos warned us about that. He said the talented 10 had a responsibility.
That's right.
You know, and so.
But they have interpreted that to mean elitism. What he was saying, that the talented 10 must be an intelligentsia to watch over the problem of our community and give sage instructions how to deal with it. But by our elite started running out the money and forgot that obligation. Right.
That's what it boils down to, you know, and my Bible tells me to be in it but not of it. You know, and like you say, the kingdom of God isn't just within. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and the rest will be added.
That's right.
You know, we got to the other way around.
We trying to seek the added stuff, the money, the grants, and the little building and things, which is necessary. But that'll be added if we got our inside together.
That's right. Everything else will fall in place. Yeah. Then we can withstand all of this the pressure that society puts us under.
There you go.
Here we go.
Like a tree standing by the water, we can't be moved, brother.
1490 WHBB. We were having an off mic conversation in terms of viewpoint, but of course we're on Facebook. 334-875-1490 and 1492 are the numbers to call if you have comments or questions. And also, you can join us live on Facebook on the Selma Post-Herald Facebook page. Now, we do have the Legal Defense Fund is having an education summit at Wallace Community College this morning from 10 until 2:30, and they are observing the 70th anniversary of Brown versus the School Board of Education. And a number of doctors on their panel who will be discussing the state of the children, you know, where our children are and what we need to do, so at least that effort is being made. You know, we've made this point before. We haven't done it on the air, but I've asked you before. I said, well, you know, at one time, there are two organizations that, regardless of what city I've been in and have gone to, a part of the country, that were at one point easily recognizable. That was the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Nation of Islam. And really, they both had, at one point, a reputation of being able to turn people's lives around. I can remember back in the day when the Nation of Islam could take a brother that was an alcoholic or a drug addict and clean him up. I don't know if that's happening to the same extent anymore with the Nation of Islam. What do you think?
As a Muslim, I've experienced these matters firsthand. The Nation of Islam was a paramilitary organization, which meant that it had a military and army. It is one thing to impose morality from out. It's another thing where a moral compass arises from within. And the source of that is inner conscience. A lot of this so-called cleaning up, you stopped drinking, you may have stopped this or that, but you had a captain over you that would take you in a basement with other fruit of Islam and would spank your behind royally if you came to the temple drunk. Okay, but that's not true religion. The religion teaches clearly, let there be no coercion in religion. Truth stands out clear from error. That means the human being has a choice. The Creator wants to give us a choice as to whether or not we want to live as moral creatures.
He gives us a choice whether we want to accept him or not.
That's right. He doesn't force that. So what has happened is African Americans, we've had a problem adjusting to what happened when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad passed, and when his son came in and said, look, this is your captain, this is your lieutenant, the Quran. Are you going to live up to it? And many of us, unfortunately, went back to our church habits where we had the Bible and would give lip profession to it, but would not practice it, that would not walk it. And unfortunately, that's happening to a certain extent in the Muslim community. But it's nowhere near like it was when I grew up in the church.
Let me see if I can get you to kind of break this down because it's interesting, and I was just thinking about the transition.
Can I say something about
Please, go ahead.
Brown?
Go ahead.
You mentioned Brown. That Brown case, I remember when I was teaching Syracuse University, a course and by Derek Bell, late Derek Bell. It's called Racism in American Law. And it's 4 cases that we need to be familiar with, because if you're not familiar with those cases, you can't really understand the Western view or the American view constitutionally toward African Americans. The American Constitution, if you look at these 4 cases, you will see that it was never racist. We say, yeah, once upon a time it was racist. No, it was not. It was discriminative against the slave and the descendants of slaves. But it was not racist against universal blacks. If you don't believe it, go and read the case that preceded the second important case, the Dred Scott decision. But before that, it was another case, La Amistad. Then you had Pleasant versus Ferguson, and then Brown versus Board of Education. And if you read Scott, it said clearly that the descendants of slaves had no rights that the Constitution was bound to respect. That was in about 1858, I think. In 1837,
Armistead.
the Armistead case, it was said clearly when you had Africans who had never been reduced to chattel slavery, who were still free human beings, it was interpreted by that same Supreme Court, not the same people, but by the Supreme Court. It stated clearly that these men had rights which the Constitution was bound to respect. So if you look at it that way, it's never been anti-black. It's been anti-slave and ex-slave. And our question should be, why is that? Why do they make a distinction between a slave in black skin and a free African in black skin?
Now, was it John Adams that defended in
John Quincy Adams.
John Quincy Adams defended the Armistead case.
Yeah, the son of the second president, John Adams. That's right.
And he later became a president himself, right?
Yeah, he became a president. Yeah. I think the 7th president.
Right.
Yes.
Well, and it kind of relates to what the question I have for you, and that is, when I think about Malcolm, and remember that he was a loyal lieutenant to Elijah Muhammad until he went to Mecca. And you've done what is it called, the Hajj. You've done the Hajj, right?
Twice.
You've done it twice, right?
Yeah.
And after he went and had
I've also made Hajj to Jerusalem.
And you've done Jerusalem too.
Yeah, I've been Hajj to Jerusalem.
Well, and I remember that when he went to Mecca and had been taught about the blue-eyed devil in the Nation of Islam,
right? And
then found that the Muslims from all over the world, from all complexions, participated. It changed his global viewpoint. And
I think that's true, but we got to understand, before he went to the Hajj, Elijah Muhammad had a son known as Wallace Muhammad. In 1961, the very night that Malcolm was debating the late Bayard Rustin at Howard, October 30th, 1961, which happened to be the birthday of Wallace, he was sent to prison for being a conscientious objector, sent to prison in Minnesota, Sandstone, Minnesota. When he came out, it was a few days after George Wallace made his famous inaugural speech, segregation now, segregation forever. When he came out, he began to challenge these Nation of Islam teachings that the black man was God and the white man was the devil. Now, he was very conversant in Quran, And he got together with Malcolm. And he told Malcolm the only way that the Nation of Islam was going to be saved is that we had to abandon the teachings of his father and take on the full teachings of the Quran.
So Wallace D. Muhammad and Malcolm X were very much like David and Jonathan.
I think in that sense, but if you read the autobiography carefully, Malcolm clearly states that Wallace Muhammad was his spiritual mentor. Or even over Elijah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. If you go read it, it's in there clearly.
Yeah, I've read it, but I didn't.
He said that Wallace Muhammad is my spiritual mentor. So Wallace broke him in. This is my point. That was in '63. He was suspended in November of '63. Malcolm was.
Right.
Okay, so when he went to Mecca, Wallace had already
prepped him for that. Yeah, that makes sense.
But seeing it live in living color made it real. Wallace was given an abstract teaching, concepts and precepts, but when he actually saw it, and I've seen them, European, blue-eyed, blonde hair, in Mecca. And they don't use a fork and a knife. The brothers get in a circle, they have these plates, and everybody eat with the tip of their finger. And I've seen Indonesian, I've seen Pakistani, I've seen people from Bangladesh, as you mentioned. I mean, as my brother was talking about this morning, they are the darker people from India. All different colors. Yes, I've seen that. So Malcolm was not exaggerating. I could see how that could have an impact on him. But the total reality, brother, is that he had already been prepped by his spiritual mentor.
So before we run out of time, I want to ask this question, because Wallace D. Muhammad really, in many ways, went to another level in terms of the United States and American Islam. But you know, when he died, I had to search, even mainstream media. I think the only way I knew he had passed away is from you and I haven't talked about it. And there may have been one media outlet that mentioned the fact that he died, but Louis Farrakhan was getting daily press even then.
Yeah, that's because the wise fear the truth. They've never feared. They didn't fear the Malcolm of all that black talk. Did nobody kill Malcolm? As long as he was running around there talking all that old black talk to the extreme. I'm sure both of us respect our inherent makeup black. We don't have a problem with our color, our hair, anything like that, or knowing something about black history. But when you say the black man is the God, then you've taken this thing to the extreme. But they never killed him. Minister Farrakhan has been teaching what he'd been teaching since 1954 or 5. He's still walking around sharp, eating 3 steak-like squares a day. So that kind of thing must not be a threat to the enemies of the race. Now let me tell you about what I know about Wallace. The powerful did not fear him in the sense of him being destructive. Every president from Jimmy Carter on had consultation with him.
He was consulting.
They consulted
with him, right.
The Pope consulted him. But the position was that the clear message that he was bringing about religion, and that most of what people in this country believe, Muslim and everybody else, was rooted in mythology. The wise felt that it would be too disruptive to allow that message to be openly preached in America where everybody could hear it, black and white. So they felt it was best to do like many have done throughout history.
Keep him quiet, huh?
Keep him quiet. Hide the voice of sobriety, sanity, and truth. But now I say this, if I remember in the 70s, him teaching against all this gang banging stuff, explaining to us how they were using music, the enemies of the race.
That's how it started.
Yeah,
right.
It's breaking out. That's how I learned to break down Superfly.
Right.
In its detrimental impact on the black psychology. And right there in Chicago, they had started a program called Blight. That means to blot out the blight, to patrol your community and get rid of all that, those negative influences, okay? But Jesse, I told you I'm here to tell the truth.
Right.
Jesse Jackson and the African American clergy did not want to hear that, and so they sabotaged the effort. And the only time I ever heard him halfway cry with a tearful sounding voice when he was talking about how they had betrayed him, how they they came together, came up with this plan, and then they went public and denounced the work. And so
now blood is running in the streets of
because
Chicago.
all of our leaders, if you look at when this man succeeded his father, Kwame Ture, every major African American leader, the African American leadership in this town, who I worked in a law firm with, they were thoroughly familiar with his message, but it was not rooted in emotional drunkenness for the black masses. And they made a decision. That's why I had a problem when Farrakhan came in. They made a decision to opt for that kind of leadership over this leadership. Even though the late J.R. Chestnut, I give him credit. He said, man, I heard Elijah's son Wallace on PBS. He said, that guy is brutally honest. J.L. told me that face to face. They knew it, but we made a decision to reject that for worldly convenience.
Well, when I tell you you're a king and you're the greatest thing since God, you buy into that. You know, that's that feel good philosophy. It feels good. You know.
But now the black God is out there killing up himself, robbing each other, committing mayhem in the community. Hey, that's what the black God is doing now.
Let's take this last break, and then we're going to start wrapping up. We've got the Legal Defense Fund coming on behind you, and so hopefully our audience is getting something out of this, because it's rare. I very rarely hear anybody break down that relationship in history from Elijah Muhammad to Wallace D. Muhammad and Malcolm X. And now we've got a series that's analyzing the relationship between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King.
But you notice they don't ever mention Wallace. So the conspiracy of silence is still going on.
Yeah. Let's take this break. We'll be back with more right after these messages. You're tuned to Viewpoint. Again, you can call us at 875-1492 or join us on Facebook on the Selma Post Herald Facebook page. We'll be right back.
I'm gonna see what the brothers the defense fund challenge
Well,
what I said about them cases.
Oh no, you know they probably said, that's an interesting point. But I hadn't really thought about. I'm gonna go back and revisit that myself. Though.
Yeah, you need to revisit.
I'm gonna go back and revisit that.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah. We're gonna have about 5 minutes or so when we come back.
Okay.
You know, but yeah.
So yeah, you missed that
Yeah.
I noticed that when I was teaching Derek Bell's book.
Oh, from Amistad to Plessy to
all the way up to and all the way up to Baca, the affirmative action cases, all the racial cases. It's called race, racism in America now.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of people, you know, they even when they talk about 3/5 of a man, they were doing it because of the vote. They were trying to hold on to political power.
That's right.
Or minimize political power.
But see, you had already reduced them to property, chattel.
That was the bottom line. Yeah.
And what they were saying subtly, there's no way I'm going to give equal citizenship
To property.
to something that I have reduced to animal level.
Well, when
Now that was wrong in reducing them to that.
but it is what it is.
Yeah, but the logic, it makes sense.
Well, I researched the history of slavery and found that the major difference between American slavery and all other forms of slavery up to that point was that
Yes.
that slaves were property, considered property.
That's right.
That wasn't done in any other
No, they were
civilization.
totally dehumanized.
Yeah, they had rights. Roman slaves had rights.
Not only that, they could rise up and exceed their master in terms of influence in Rome, and that happened, you know. So, no, it was totally different kind of slavery. That's why they put child on the front, see. Yeah. So they said, no, you're not gonna say this cow is equal to me. But see, we reduced these Africans to cow. They still have their humanity.
Who else made that point? I think it was not Frederick Douglass. It may have been Frederick Douglass, and I believe Booker T. Washington and Langston Hughes noticed that when they would travel across by ship, the difference with how Africans were treated in African Americans.
Oh yeah.
You know,
that's the basis for that.
Right.
That's the basis for that.
Let me get them. Let them come in here so they can sit down and listen to you bash them a little bit, huh? Okay. They'll be able to hear you also.
I see your esteemed guests have arrived, my friend.
Hold on. For 1490 WHBB. What was that, attorney?
I see your esteemed guests have arrived. I tell you, the strategy that was hammered out by Brother Houston up at Howard University. He's the one that basically laid the theoretical foundation for the challenge against the constitutional interpretation as to the status of African Americans in this country. That strategy was hammered out by Houston up at Howard.
Is this the one that mentored Thurgood Marshall?
Yeah,
I just did a thing on. I mean, I just did a talk
and
report
so
on.
I was always impressed with his mind, and so anybody that carries on the legacy and legal defense fund, then certainly they should warrant our respect and our admiration. You know,
We're going to preempt the news this hour because we got, in order to make this transition, we have a call, and then I want to ask you the last question. You know, we've got NACA coming in tomorrow with all to do this the ribbon cutting for home ownership and homes, and the rhetorical question of where do we go from here? Hold on one second. Okay? That caller is gone. We can go straight into the question, attorney. Where do we go from here?
well, if we're going to put up necessary physical structures, dwelling, when you see the dilapidated housing stock, that certainly is progress. But there's a difference between a house and a home. We must establish institutions in these refurbished neighborhoods that can go to influencing the values, the internal values that make up a home. Activate the churches in the neighborhood. bring the parents together in association, revitalize the neighborhood youth concept. All these things must be brought to bear, as well as putting up these much needed physical structures. If we don't do that, I can imagine a state where in 5 to 10 years you go through these same neighborhoods with these well-constructed homes being in a state of disrepair. And we don't want to see that. So we must have intelligence to not only construct houses, but to create collateral institutions to bring home building values within the confines of the walls of those houses.
And I would imagine if we do that, we won't have any wholesale repeat occurrences like the young lady that was tortured and killed in Birmingham.
No, and then you had a young man getting consciousness forming groups like the Panthers, patrolling the neighborhood, running the drug pushers out, and getting rid of that toxic poison from our community. These are the kinds of things when you just don't start building physical home, reconstructing physical home, but having a systematic scientific strategy of internal cognitive restructuring in that neighborhood.
Okay.
And so that's going to be the challenge.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney. We'll have you come back because you didn't update us on some of the other things that you're doing, but we've got the Legal Defense Fund standing in the wings, and we're going to make that transition. We're going to join Fox News already in progress on WHBB Selma. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and I will get in more information when you stop being so stingy and you bring me back on future occasions. Thank you very much,
yes,
my
sir.
friend.
Okay, Attorney. Talk to you later.
Yeah.